This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Precision Optics. Thank you Sitka Gear and Precision Optics for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Good day, Jason, Chris. Welcome to Talk is Sheep. Great to have Safari Club International on the podcast today.
How you doing today? Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Doing really good. Chris, how about you?
Doing really well. I'm glad to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, great. Well, you're an old veteran at this, Chris. You've been on once or twice for sure, and Jason, first time on. But anyway, before we kind of kick things off, let's just kind of get a frame of reference of who you guys are. And everyone knows Safari Club International. There's no introductions required there. But maybe, Jason, if you could kick off for us, kind of what your role is with SCI and, what you're doing, what part of the world you're in, that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Safari Club International, we're 53 years old now. In 1971, we were established. 53 years old because that's when I was born. So that's an easy one to remember. I've been with the organization over 20 years. I formerly was with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I've done some work with Ducks Unlimited prior to that as well. And so I've been in this space for a long time. I'm the Director of Membership and Chapter Services for the entire organization. I started off, I live in Canada. I reside 100 miles west of Ottawa, Pembroke, Petawawa, military family. And we've been doing this nonstop and really hammering at it. And now my portfolio takes on, I look after all the chapter services. So I have 3 people in the United States currently. One's in Alaska, one's in Iowa, and one's in Oklahoma. And then we just brought on Chris. She's up here in Canada to kind of relieve me of the Canadian chapter duties. And then I have a gentleman in Europe as well. And so we have chapters, members in 115 countries, over 50,000 members worldwide. And we're here to really, our mission and our goal is to protect and preserve hunting. In the United States, we say it's to the right to hunt. In Canada, it's a privilege. So it's our hunting heritage that we're here to protect and preserve.
Wow. Yeah, that's there's a lot to digest there. And SCI is definitely the leader on the advocacy and, looking out for hunters. What is it? Hunters First? Is that what it is?
First for Hunters. And we have an embassy, which we've coined the Hunters Embassy in Washington, D.C. We have staff here, based out of Ottawa. We just opened an office in South Africa. We have partners with many organizations. Again, FACE in Europe. We have a gentleman in Europe who does a lot of advocacy work for us. We've got lawyers, 8 lawyers on staff. Our goal, and it doesn't matter if you're a squirrel hunter, a sheep hunter, or an elephant hunter, we're here to protect your rights and preserve your hunting heritage is our goal and our mission.
Man, I love that. There's so much to dig into here. Like you're just talking about this stuff, and I was like, I didn't even know where we're going today on this, but there's so much to talk about, and that was one of them. And we're going to get to you here, Chris, too. But already you've unpeeled that onion, and we start talking about hunting, and it's like, I love the concept of what SCI stands for as defending hunting, and we're not going to discriminate. If it's legal, if it's sustainable, you guys have your litmus of whatever you feel is, makes the standard. But there's so many people just get rid of the Africa stuff, get rid of elephants. Like we've heard this, we've seen it in Ottawa, right, Jason? We had the when we had the get together with the Conservative Hunting and Angling Caucus and the symposium out there. People are like, why are we defending that? It's like, where do you draw the line? That's a rabbit hole we're going to go down there. I know we're a short time today with so many cool things to talk about. Okay, Chris,
sorry, real quick, you hit it on the head. I mean, if it's fair, ethical, legal hunting, we should defend it. And whether that's, some people don't like to, use a crossbow as opposed to a vertical bow or muzzleloader versus rifle or, high fence versus low fence or free range. If it's considered fair and ethical, which means the animal can elude the hunter, then we support it and it's legal. we support it. There's enough people that are out to stop our traditions and our heritage in the world, regardless. I mean, they'd take away squirrel hunting if they could. That, if we don't stand up for each other, then we lose before we even get started.
Well, and Jason, Chris, we all know that like the end game is to end it all, right? Like there's entities out there, they want all of it. So, you say, well, give them this or give them that. And, in firearms ownership, I know that's not our mandate, your mandate particularly, but it certainly affects us. All these things, it's like, okay, nobody stood up for when they took away handguns. Nobody stood up when they took away the grizzly bear. And it's like, you think they're going to stop just because and we're seeing it now. Like, last week, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, a new round of bans coming in, right? And it doesn't stop this week or next week or a month from now or 6 months from now until it's all gone. That's the end game for sure. But for some, right? We all know that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's funny, we talk about it and you're like, oh, you're fear mongering, you're this and you're that. And like, no, we're not. Like, everyone was like, oh, ban the handguns and then it all goes away. And not even starting there. It's just, that's just the low hanging fruit. And then they just go after everything else. So.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, we could talk all day on it. Polar bears, elephant ivory. I mean, 21 permits issued for elephant ivory. Why would they waste their time on that? And who are we to manage Africa's wild game? I mean, I think they, if you look at their population levels and their plan that they've done, they're doing an excellent job, probably better than we are, because they've added value to the wildlife. And so the farmers and the people are managing the wildlife. And here we are telling them, no, that's a bad thing. It's kind of like, and I know this is near and dear to Chris, you start talking about the seal population in Eastern Canada, and all of these countries have banned seal imports and exports. And, it's decimating our fish sanctuaries. It's decimating all kinds of stuff, and also killing an economic industry in Canada. And, we really got to sit back and look at this and go, why are we doing this? Are we doing this because somebody feels good because they've fought this? Or is it the right thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to segue for a second. Okay. Chris Everett, former chief of staff for Blaine Calkins, and that was how we got to know each other. And then you've done such great work in Blaine's office. And then last summer, this summer, I guess, you made the transition over to SCI. So you're on the podcast before, sort of in your government role, but now you're with SCI. So welcome to the podcast. Let's get the 30-second update on Chris Everett.
30 seconds. Oh boy. So yeah, at the end of June, beginning of July, I made the switch to get out of politics, leave Parliament Hill a little bit behind and move over into the world of full-time advocacy. So it was something that had been on my mind for a number of years that, I was doing a lot of advocacy from within the ranks, but I really wanted to kind of step out and do this full time, because there was a lot of stuff that I, was doing on Parliament Hill that was great work, but it wasn't what my passion was. So to be able to join Jason and the team over at SCI full time and be able to work full time on my passion of getting people outside and protecting the hunting heritage that we have here in Canada was really important to me.
So is it interest in it, the advocacy part, like looking out for our hunting heritage? Is it the membership, the conservation? Like, SCI is many things to many people, and you guys are the world leader in advocacy, in my opinion. Certainly, when people think about advocating for hunters' rights, hunter heritage, you think first of SCI. I don't think of too many orgs that come above you guys. Is that what was kind of on your mind? Was that aspect, the advocacy side? Because I think that's a strength. When I see you, Chris, I think like you have pretty good understanding of the machinations of Ottawa, but you're working with member services and connecting with these the different SCI organizations across the provinces across Canada. What's kind of your passion when it comes to that specifically?
Well, my job itself is actually twofold. So I manage and work with all the chapters across Canada and work with Jason on that. But I also took on the role of advocacy across Canada. So working with the national legislators as well as the provincial legislators on issues of importance to hunting and to our hunters that are part of our membership and make up our membership of SCI. So, for instance, recently I was in Alberta and I was able to meet with Minister Todd Loewen to discuss a bunch of the issues that are happening in Alberta and how SCI can actually play a role in helping to advocate and to help, with boots on the ground for any of these projects and such like that. So the advocacy side is definitely where my passion lies. But I've also, as we've talked about on the podcast before, I'm a huge supporter of getting women and children involved and getting them outside and participating in hunting. And so, working with the chapters, a lot of them do youth programs or women's programs. And so being able to kind of piece all of that together into a role such as what I'm doing now is a lot of fun for me. And it's where all my passions and my drive is for.
Awesome. Very cool. I'd like to touch a little bit on advocacy in Canada. I think that's interesting that, you've been hired into that role. I look at SCI and you guys are without question a leader in the advocacy and, protecting hunters' rights and hunter heritage. But you see a lot of it in the U.S. and certainly when I look at a company, talk to Jason Price, Grand Slam Club Ovis, and he's like, hey, SCI does the job better than anyone else. Just give them some money and send them on their way. So obviously GSO has sent you guys some cash for the advocacy work down south. How does it look in Canada? Like Canada is different. Like there's that little line at the 49th parallel, anyway, regardless, there's a big difference between Canada and the U.S. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between advocacy in Canada and the advocacy in the U.S. And is SCI taking a bigger role in that? I guess with your position, Chris, just touch a bit on the difference between the two. Either one of you, please.
Well, so I work with the advocacy team down in the US on a lot of the issues. So whenever something comes up, I bring it to their attention. I give my perspective or the conversations I've had with other people, other stakeholders on the ground, bring those concerns to the advocacy team, and then we draft the response together. So they are very much in tune and aware of what's happening in Canada, and they want to help out as best as they can, but having people like Jason and myself being able to advise them on the ground game politics within Canada and kind of the best direction to go is also very helpful. Plus having their expertise in the work that they've done and being successful on the American side is definitely beneficial to us and helping us draft our responses to the issues as well that come up.
I think that Chris is being humble as well. Her expertise in Canada and politics and been around the block at a senior level, chief of staff for Blaine Calkins, the chair of the Conservative Hunting and Angling Caucus, is no small thing. And, that was one of the reasons we brought Chris on board is she brings a lot to the table. She understands Canadian politics and also at a federal level, but also at a provincial level, which, in my role, I've taken on so much that I just didn't have time to continue that effort in Canada. And we thought, hey, look, this is a perfect opportunity for us to be able to still work with the government, the Conservative government, of course, but all parties, and come up with ways that we can help our chapters and do things. And a great example that we work with the United States. So there was a limit on the weight of meat that you could bring back that was harvested. And it was, I think, 50 pounds. Chris can talk more on it. And Chris jumped on it right away, contacted our team in DC. Collaboratively, they worked together, and we had that restriction lifted. You can imagine what that means to somebody going back with, a dozen, 24 geese, a moose, a bear, a deer, whatever that looks like. That makes a huge difference, especially for outfitters. And with that weight restriction, we were looking at problems with, wasted game, giving game away, all of the political rhetoric we got to go through to donate or give away our wild game today. So it really helped a lot. And if it wasn't for Chris and Regina on our DC side, that would have never happened.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let's look at Canada. It's a bit of a train wreck in Canada, right? We've seen what's happened around, so many different policies that have come out, in BC, we obviously the grizzly bear. I love to go to that one. That's my go-to. But, there's so many examples. This one that you just mentioned, on the firearm advocacy side, what's going on with the restrictions that's being, and just willy-nilly with no, not really a lot of forethought and obviously a lot of oversight on so many different areas. But, are we doing enough on the advocacy side in Canada is where I'm going. I feel like we're showing up at a gunfight, and we're showing up with a jackknife. I just feel like I think we need to do a bit more. Is there a need for that? And is that something that's on the radar for SCI? I know we talk about it internally in BC here, but I'd love to hear your guys' perspective.
If I can, I'll just throw a couple things out and then I'll let Chris talk because she's more of the professional. I think we're scratching the surface, and I agree with you. I think we're bringing a jackknife to a gunfight. And you talk about United States and Canada. In the United States, we can throw money at politicians and people and kind of help sway those decision makers, and that we can't do that in Canada, where our hands are really tied that way. And so, we got to look at other ways, obviously lobbying government, and we do things like, the outdoor wild game, outdoor caucus dinner, we do a shoot where we bring members of parliament and their staff, where they're invited to come and shoot for the day to kind of see what it's like and understand and learn a little bit about firearms. That's been a huge asset for us. So we are trying to do an awful lot, but financial reasons that becomes a problem. The other thing too is, and as you're well aware of this, is not a lot of hunting regulations and stuff are done federally. Most of that is all provincial related. So now I'm having to track through every province in Canada as to what they're doing and, what are their political motivations, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, again, why bringing Chris on that can work with our chapters provincially and try to get them the resources they need quicker. It has been so important.
Yeah. Just to elaborate more too, I'm, for years working on Parliament Hill, I say this a lot when I talk about this issue of the national advocacy side of things. I would see agriculture organizations come in for a week at a time, multiple times a year, where all the agriculture groups come in, and they were a force on Parliament Hill. Everyone knew they were coming in. So you had a real collaborative of organizations coming in that all had the common goal of advocating for agriculture. And so I really think that the outdoor space needs that. And that's something that I'm working on, building the relationships and working with other organizations to build that on a national scale, to bring that awareness, because I think the more that we bring it kind of into the faces of parliamentarians on Parliament Hill and make us be a force to reckon with almost on Parliament Hill would be really beneficial for the outdoor space, and just bring awareness. Simply having people there to show, hey, we're human and we live off the land and we are the first and utmost conservationists because we see what happens on the land. That's kind of a big thing about it. But on the provincial level too, that's something that I do have connections in various provincial governments across the board, but I'm building those. I'm working on building those connections more to get to know the ministers across the provincial governments, and then work, like Jason said, work with the chapters on what are the issues on the ground, what are our membership saying that they're concerned about, and then bring those issues forward to the ministers that, as SCI, we can kind of stand up and bring those concerns forward. So that is definitely something that, Canada's a very, very large country, and to be able to dive into each province, and the politics at the provincial level are very different than federally, but at the end of the day, it's conservation and hunting that matters. And that's what we're fighting for.
Right on. Let's talk a little bit about why can't we get I'll be frank here, why can't we get our shit together as a community? You talk about the ag lobby, right? We've got farmers that show up. Is it because we're too fragmented? Like, we all have there's bow hunters, there's all these different entities. Whereas, like, as an industry, like the ag industry, they're like, okay, like they get the farmers together and they have a very common goal. I can't understand why we can't. Can you guys provide some context of why we just cannot get our eggs in a row and we all get on the same page? Even look at and this is political, and I don't mean to go down the rabbit hole, but the gun lobby, right? You look at the different organizations. How many of them are there? Why can't we get on the same page? Let's comment on a little bit on that. Why it's so fragmented in our community, and what we need to do to get on the same page.
I 100% agree. I think we are fragmented, and I think it goes back to kind of the comments I made earlier. Is if I'm a bow guy, I'm against the crossbow guys, or if I'm a deer hunter, whatever it is, and we really need to come together, and that's a goal that Chris and I have set, and I know that we're working with yourself and a couple other organizations. We want to start a collaborative because we really need to be united. Whether it's the guns that they're trying to confiscate or whatever it is, we need to come together and say, no, you're not going to divide us anymore. The 80, 100 organizations with all of these members, this is the way it's going to be, because this is what our membership is saying. And until we do that, I think we're going to keep spinning our wheels, because they're smart enough to know that they can divide us and conquer us, and pin us against each other. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, it's fine. I think on top of that, it's just kind of how we got here is for a long time we've allowed politicians to kind of set that narrative and to divide. And the current Liberal government has constantly said that they're not going after hunters, but they're going after sport shooters. So then the sport shooters feel alienated by the hunting community. And so we ourselves have allowed the politicians, instead of us all standing together side by side fighting against the politicians, we've allowed them to divide us into these segments instead of just standing together. Agriculture does have their differences. You've got you do have some major differences within the agriculture, from supply managed sector to the non-supply managed sector, but at the end of the day, they all stand side by side and fight together for their ability to continue harvesting and farming animals. So that's something that I think we can really kind of take note of and remember that going forward, that at the end of the day, they're going to chip away at our ability to be in the outside. So, the grizzly bear hunt in BC, for instance, that's something that was easy for them to target. Sport shooting firearms are easy for them to target. The seal hunt, that's easy for them to target. But we can, unless we all stand up together and say, no, enough's enough, we're all together. We do have to fight that divide constantly. And so now trying to walk back to get these things back is going to be a difficult one, but I think that it's not insurmountable. I think that we can do it. We just need to all be on the same page and work together for it.
Yeah. And, I think when we think about this, it's, there's the low hanging fruit, the grizzly bears and the seal hunt, and of course, and handguns, that's all. But, again, we're not, it's much bigger than that. And it's like fishing's a threat. And then we start looking collectively, even farming, there's people that don't want farmers. They want people eating tofu or whatever. I don't know what they want us to eat, but, so it just doesn't go away. And I've heard that argument. Well, actually the grizzly bear going, and I've heard people in important positions say that was a good thing for our industry, grizzly bear going away, because it took the pressure off. I'm like, yeah, that's really worked out well for us, right? It stopped all these other hunts that they're going after. So, yeah. And again, back to my point, I guess, with SCIs, you guys have done a phenomenal job of standing up for hunters, that you guys do not discriminate. If it meets the criteria that, most hunters recognize as acceptable, or, that it's covered. Like, you guys are going to fight for elephant hunting. You're going to fight for all of it. You're there to fight for all hunters. And I think that's a really cool aspect of what you guys do.
Yeah, just to go back to what you said, you talked about the BC grizzly bear, and I know that SCI contributed somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 to that particular fight, and which isn't a great deal amount of money considering the amount of money that's been invested in it. And that was just at the Canadian level. I think at US we committed another 100,000 or something. But anyways, what I heard in that was, well, it's just affecting mostly outfitters. And, most residents weren't hunting the grizzly bears. And, whether they were hunters or not, they weren't fighting it because it didn't really affect them. What they don't realize is it's going to affect them tremendously, because that's something that they can hold on to, that they can say, well, we did it here and it was no big deal, and we didn't need to use science. We were using social science, if you will. And, so let's move on to the next one. Next one's going to be mountain lions, or, black bears, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to chip away. They're going to start with the easy ones. Why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like on an advocacy side, it's a challenge. Like, we always stand up and say, hunting the predators is important for the ungulate population and stuff, and we stand behind that, because that is a role that hunters play, is to help manage the predator numbers. But it's hard to sell that to someone who's in downtown Toronto or downtown Vancouver. It's hard to sell that idea to them, because they don't see what's happening on the landscape. They don't see the footage, or what, as hunters, we see when we're out in the wilderness and we see the predation actually happening. It's hard for us to justify or to explain that to people when they live in their little glass bubbles, in a sense, right? They don't see that stuff happening, and it's only once it starts affecting them. I think back, Jason can attest to this too. In Ontario, the spring bear hunt was canceled, and it wasn't until bears started showing up in the urban centers closer to Toronto and the greater Toronto area that all of a sudden there was calls to bring back the spring bear hunt. Hunters have a role in conservation, and we have a massive role when it comes to population control. And that is something that, I think maybe as hunters, we can do a little bit better time or better job trying to explain it and trying to demonstrate it. But it's that is something that I think SCI has that we can bring to the table. Is we're participating in a lot of studies. We're participating in a lot of these education campaigns to try to help explain to people why hunters are so important to the landscape in that sense.
And I think if you're a hunter, and whether you hunt that animal or you don't hunt that animal, you need to support the hunting side of it. And that's, I think, the big one for me. I mean, the person in Toronto who never hunts and never leaves the city, I get they're not going to stand up for it. But the guy that's a deer hunter or a duck hunter even, I should stand up for that, because to me, that's important. It's hunting, it's legal, it's ethical, et cetera, et cetera. And you look at, we'll talk about the spring bear hunt in Ontario. It took us 20 some years to bring that back. And as you said, until it became a safety concern, they had no interest in it, because it's a political issue for them. Right now, we're dealing with it in Alberta. There's issues with grizzly bears. So they've brought back, they're not calling it a hunt, but a nuisance bear hunt, if you will. It's a very limited start, but it's another one. It's been 10 years. It was supposed to be a 2-year moratorium while they studied them. And now they're starting to have issues with them, so they have to do something. And they're going to use hunters to help with problematic bears, because they know that is the best way to do that and handle it. But, to be honest, and scientists have looked at it and said that hunt should have been open years ago, because the population levels are there, and to properly manage it, it should be open.
Yeah, and a huge shout out to Minister Lowen for getting that going, because I think he single-handedly was like sort of carrying the torch on that, and obviously didn't do it single-handedly, but if it wasn't for him, I don't think it would have happened, in my opinion. And he's taking 100%. A lot of heat over it. So yeah, it's 100% awesome.
Agree on that. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and Jason, you bring up something that really resonated with me there, is that, as hunters, we have a frickin' responsibility. I think what happens is we have members, right? Or maybe non-members, like people in our community that think, oh, SCI is going to save us, or the society, or our federation, or whatever. Get a life, man. We're not going to save you. We all have a responsibility on every level, on the advocacy level, on outreach level, educating our neighbors, our kids, our families, and then supporting these organizations like SCI that are doing great work for advocacy, and making sure that we're there contributing. But if you think you're going to sit back and let someone else fix this problem, it's going to take the community. It's not going to be, I really don't think it's going to be one organization that's going to save the day. I think we need to do it collectively as a community.
We need to do it collectively. And if there's a call to action from your organization, I don't care if it's a local federation, a local gun club, a national organization, man, you got to pick up that pen or computer or whatever it is and respond and take action, because, when 20 people respond, that's nothing. They just look at that, and Chris can speak to it. You used to get the letters come across your desk. You get
100%.
thousands and thousands of letters, they're going to look at it. You get hundreds of letters, they're not paying attention. So, when there is a call to action, we, our membership hunters, we need to respond, and it's that simple.
Well, I'll give an example of that right there. In Blaine's office, about 2 years ago, we started getting all these postcards, and it all had to do with natural health products. And we were overwhelmed and inundated with postcards and emails and letters about natural health products and how important they were, because the Liberal government had taken and were changing some of the laws around natural health products and how they were classified it through Health Canada. And so Blaine took that, and he had so much communication from his constituents about it that he took that and turned it into a private member's bill, and he's been successfully getting it through the House of Commons and through Parliament to reverse those, because natural health products are such an important role and to his constituents, and that's what he was seeing. But it was the overwhelming number of postcards and emails and letters that he was getting that brought that to his attention. And so that's something that, on the hunting side of things, on the outdoor side of things, if we are communicating to the legislators the importance of this, and we get everyone writing in about it, they will turn and they will pay attention to it, because it's volume, it's numbers. That's what helps.
So if we send 1 million postcards to the Liberals, it's going to change the gun ban?
I doubt it, but who knows these days? They're in such turmoil. They might be looking for something to kind of change the narrative.
Yeah, but you're saying that sort of campaign did work. So if there is something that, as a community we need to do, something like that might be an effective campaign.
100%. And it works on the provincial level too.
Right.
Like it's not just a federal kind of issue or anything like that. Provincially, each province, like if there's an issue that is super important to your constituents, the more people that write in, the more they turn around and pay attention.
I think the biggest thing is, if we wait for something to happen, it's too late, because it's already happened.
Yeah.
And I think that is a Canadian, it's not affecting me in my backyard or where I hunt. So it's not a big deal, right? I don't hunt with a handgun, or I don't, you know what I'm saying? Where the minute they want to take my bolt action rifle that I hunt with, well, that's a whole different ballgame. And as long as we have that attitude and that, we rest on our laurels like that, we're going to lose every time.
100%.
Yeah, we need to get our act together. Oh my goodness. I talking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got so much work to do. But it's interesting. Like we're pretty proactive. I know SCI is a leader on their Act Now campaigns. It's like you guys have a call to action, and you guys do a good job. I'm a life member, proud supporter of SCI. I love what you guys do, and I love your call to actions. It's simple, it's straightforward. But as hunters, we just don't get our shit together, and we don't send in even a couple thousand letters. There's just not enough engagement, and you make it easy for people. Here's the letter, print it off, sign it. People don't even do that. It's like, no. My goodness.
No, I mean, renewing a membership to an organization, whether it's Wild Sheep or it's SCI or it's, BC Fed, I don't care what it is. They don't, until there's an issue, and then they're like, what are you doing about it? These organizations don't run on fumes. They need to be funded. And there is work going on all the time. I mean, we're working right now because there's an election coming. We know there's an election coming, and we're working on that and what we're going to be doing. What's the first 100 days going to look like? Are we holding the new government accountable, whether it's Liberal, NDP, Conservative? It doesn't matter. We want to have a plan that says, here's what we want, here's what we expect, and here's what we're looking for. And I think, everybody out there needs to be doing the same thing. So, people like Chris and myself, this is our career. We are a volunteer-led organization, but it all takes money and time and energy. And I'll tell you, we're frugal. We're not wasting money. We're not, nothing like that. We're here and working for the organization. And we've been hiring passionate people that really, truly believe, like yourself, Kyle, I know that you're a diehard, passionate person for the wild sheep, and we really get it. And so I think if people realize that, they'd be like, you know what, I need to be a member of that organization. They're doing great stuff. I always say we're the best kept secret. We don't share our wins and what we're doing near enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well said, for sure. Okay. One thing I want to touch base. How's your time, Jason? Where are we looking at? I know you're a
I
busy
got about
guy.
another 5 minutes, and then I can jump off and you guys can continue.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, I'm going to grab you a little bit more here before you go. Let's talk about this sort of transition. We've got the North American wildlife model. It's been successful. It's worked well. There's other models that work well. We talk about Africa. That's been very successful in some of the countries, but there's been sort of this slow erosion in Canada and certainly in British Columbia around science-based and like emotional decision making. Oh, the welfare of or the feelings of animals, not a holistic welfare of the ecosystem, right? I think this is a cancer that's freaking destroying us, man. It's not good. And how do we change that?
I don't know how to change that. I think we need to start. I think the world is starting to change it because our whole, and I'm not talking just even the wildlife. I'm talking the entire world has kind of went that whole holistic, and I think people are kind of going, whoa, it's getting out of hand. And we need to manage our wildlife. I mean, it just has to happen. What we know works is science. And if we don't do that, the problem is the ramifications we're not going to see in 5 or 10 or 15 years. It's going to be too late by the time we realize that this has been a mistake. And until we can get the leaders, the decision makers to realize that, we're in big trouble, that way. And I think that we just need to keep hammering on them. Again, we're talking about building this collaborative that these are the messages we need to tell them that, forget about social science. It's what is best for wildlife management. And who is the best wildlife managers? We all know it's hunters. We're the best fundraisers. We give back the most. We do the most. And anglers and trappers, of course. But the people, we pay for the landscape. We pay with licenses and everything else. And nothing against bird watchers and hikers, but what are they paying to use the landscape?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's where, and money makes the world go round. We understand that. But at the same time, we also have a true care and passion for wildlife. We want to see it as bad as they do. And we just know how to manage it properly so our great, great, great grandkids can enjoy it. We don't want to see the way the buffalo went, where it wasn't managed. And, that's what's going to happen if we don't watch it, manage it. You really want a great example. Look at Kenya when they closed hunting. The population, the wild populations are decimated.
How come we can't articulate that? How come when we see these things and they happen, how are we not able to communicate that to the non-hunters so they can see how bad this is for wildlife? Like I just don't get how people cannot see it or how we can't get that message out. They just don't want to hear it, I guess. I don't know.
They don't want to hear it. And unfortunately, our political system is, they're concerned with votes. Mm-hmm. And what's going to get me reelected? What's going to get us the votes? Doesn't matter what's right or wrong anymore. And I shouldn't say that's not always the case, but a good part of that is, and a great example is you look at the grizzly bear in Alberta. Minister Lowen did a great thing. He kind of but if Minister Lowen had his way, he'd go, the grizzly bear hunt's back on because science says it should be. But because of political votes and his party, and it's not just his decision, I get that, they can't do that. And that, goes back to, I don't know what the answer is. You look at BC, there's a great example. They closed the grizzly bear. It's got a great population. And where's the riots? Where's the uproar? Everybody just kind of went, okay. And yeah, we have a lawsuit and everything else going on, but that's not going to bring back the bear hunt or help the grizzly population. That's going to help some outfitters who've been wronged and are losing some money if we win the case. So you tell me, what's the magic bullet or the way to fix this, I guess is.
Well, now we have no advocate for grizzly bears. Like we don't have, well, I guess there are some anti-hunting grizzly bear advocates, but basically their advocacy is like anti-hunting. That's really, but they're not
Right.
out generating money. Our surcharges went to that, our license sales. But again, even hunters in our own province of BC, we're sitting there screaming at the government that we want all our like up our charges, up our surcharges, up
Right.
our license fees. We'll pay for it all. And they're like, they won't even do that. They don't even, it's like we want to carry the water on this one, and they don't let you. So it's
Right.
it's insane. Anyway, there's a lot of work to do.
It certainly is, but I think the world needs to, and at a broader scope, we need a change. We need a change.
Right.
You're seeing it. You've seen it in the States. You've seen it with the elections in the States. You're seeing that they're kind of going, you know what? Maybe we're on the wrong course here, and we need a course correction.
Yeah, for sure. No,
And
well
I think
said.
it's coming in a rapid pace in Canada. And just the last couple of weeks, you look at the federal government, you look at the by-elections, you look at the provincial elections. I think that the world is starting to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a bit more balance, right? We need a bit more balance. It's
Yep.
you talk about pendulum swinging and things changing, and it's like, where's balance in all the equation here? Let's just have a respectful conversation, try and find some balance somewhere in the middle. And just seems to be a lack of common sense in so many areas these days. So, but
Absolutely.
all right, I know you got to go. I'm going to let you
You.
go. Chris, you good for a minute or two, or you got to go too?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Take care, Jason.
Bye-bye.
Good. Awesome. Wow. Okay. So, um, science-based wildlife management.
Yeah.
How, from your perspective, like when you were on sort of, when you had your government hat on, um, what do we need to change? What do we need to do a little bit differently to be more effective as a community? I think, you mentioned earlier about the lobby, right, or being more effective. I had a meeting with Blaine recently, Blaine Calkins, and Blaine was like, it's much easier to talk to a group of you than just to talk to all of you individually. It's not as effective, right? So what's your perspective on that, Chris?
Definitely getting everyone on the same page and together is it's volume and numbers, like I said earlier, just having everyone on the same page. And I think talking about the science-based stuff, honestly, we just need to really push for politicians to put science first and vote second, because that is where we're seeing, like, if you look at the bird numbers in across Canada, what are the best and the healthiest population of birds? It's birds that hunters hunt, because that's where the money is going. So, let's look at the science. Let's follow the science and listen to the science. In Ontario, I bring it back to Ontario because that's where I live, and I'm aware of a lot of the issues because firsthand I'm on the ground. We have an Algonquin wolf, and that's a whole other issue that is going on in Ontario. But I'm seeing in districts that are not allowed to harvest or hunt them that they're getting bold. They're, stalking people. The deer population, the grouse population is all down, and it all stems from the previous liberal government in Ontario, again, putting the Algonquin wolf on the endangered list when the population itself is actually healthy. They do need to actually listen to science-based stats and take that into consideration across the board, because if they're not paying attention to that, then we are going to see a trickle-down effect of other species. Jason alluded to, and I talked a little bit about the seal hunt. If you look at the seal population numbers out on the East Coast, they're not meeting their targets for what should be harvested to have sustainable fish stocks in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's all because of the anti-hunting community shutting down Newfoundlanders from being able to do their job and helping manage the population of seals out there. And that becomes a big issue when your salmon stocks, your cod stocks are all being decimated because the seal harvest numbers are drastically lower than what they should be. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think the target this year for harvest of seals in the commercial seal hunt was 450,000 seals, I believe, was the target. But because the seal hunt in Newfoundland is shut down when the buyers stop buying because the markets won't buy anymore, they only harvested something like 32 or 38,000 seals. So when you have over 400,000 seals not harvested because of that, can you imagine what that impact is on the other, like that trickle down? So we're seeing it across the board. And I think that's something that we really need to push politicians to do, is to start focusing on conservation and the science and the stats, not based on what the electorate thinks that they want.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you talk about the buyers, right? And, like that's one thing that the anti-hunting community has done a pretty good job of, is they've made economic issues around this. So they, one example was the export of meat, right? We talked about the SCI, fighting for hunters on that angle of it, right? Oh, if you can't take any of the meat back, it probably, for trophy hunters, it's probably not going to have as much impact. But certainly if somebody wants to take meat back, they're like, oh, I'm not going to go and do that hunt because I can't take the meat anymore. It's just like death by a thousand cuts. But the seal is an example. I had a meeting this morning with the president of the BC Trappers Association, and we talked about what are those jackets that had the coyote fur on them and they banned them, the Canadian Canada Goose, right? So classic example. Coyotes are worth zero now. So trappers, we've got a serious population problem in BC right now with coyotes, or I'm sure it's all across Canada, but certainly BC. Because so he said coyotes were getting $150 a coyote at the height when Canada Goose needed the coyote for fur for the jackets, and then when they stopped it, they're less than $20 at market now. So they lose money. So there's no economic incentive for them. So they might go out and do it because they're whatever, but they're losing their ass on it. So they don't do it anymore. So we've got this huge population growth of coyotes, and they're killing all our sheep and other ungulates too, right? So it's a conservation concern, and there's no balance, right? And it's not, we don't want to kill all the coyotes. We want balance so that we don't have any, we have some sheep left, or we have some mule deer left, or we have some, whatever the case may be. But these things all have knock-on effects, but that's the one thing the anti-hunting community's done, is they've targeted these different areas, made it really difficult on an economic level to make it viable.
Well, they show images of a polar bear that's actually sick, and they parade that around as this is what all polar bears are looking like up north, right? And that's not the case. The polar bear numbers are actually very stable. Seals, the same thing. They, blue sky, white ice, red blood on the ice from the seals. So then it looks barbaric. So there's different things that the anti-hunters have done a very good job at portraying us as being barbarics, but in reality, we're doing our role in helping manage the population. And like it or not, there is urban sprawl. There's humans that are coming into conflict with wildlife. And so therefore we need to help wildlife, and we have to help them manage their population numbers so that the world can sustain us all. And that's what we need to do as hunters, and that's our role. And if we're not able to do it, then wildlife becomes unbalanced, and then you do lose ungulates and other rough grouse and turkeys and all of that stuff. You have to manage all of the populations, not just ourselves in that sense.
Yeah. Well said. Can you divulge any quote trade secrets or insider information? Like what's high on the list of priorities? Maybe not for SCI. You can, if you can share that, that's great. But what's scares you guys? What's on your radar? Maybe you personally, and what would you like to fix? Like what's kind of like, hey, we need to sort this out, or what are you going like? This is going to be the next problem. We've got to be really careful here and make sure we do what we can to look after it.
I mean, guns are always going to be a constant worry. They're promising to release more firearms on a list in February. So I think that's something we do have to pay close attention to and communicate on. I imagine the SKS is going to be on that list in February. They're just biding their time before they can do it. So for any hunters out there using the SKS, it's, be prepared kind of thing, because they've paraded it around a few times, but they haven't actually banned it yet. So I would say guns are kind of on the federal level something that we need to pay attention to closest. And that's kind of the thing that I'm focusing on the most right now and paying attention to, just because it is a hot topic.
Do you
Yeah.
think this last ban that, this in December, is that just like classic vote getting, like with Polly there, and it's like, time of year, like it was the anniversary, and is it just classic vote getting, or is it like, what's really going on there? Or is there really like, is there a mandate to like just like, obviously they're getting a huge push from like the anti-hunting or anti-gun community for sure. Like that's a given. But is it just classic vote getting, like, oh, okay, we'll just, trickle a few out here and there, or is there more going on there than that?
I definitely think it's just classic vote getting because they're tanking in the polls across the country. And so there's a funny meme out there that talks about the Liberals playbook whenever they're facing pressure, and there's two topics that they go to: guns and abortion. And on December the 5th, they went to both. And just the gun issue was just kind of the biggest thing. The NDP hijacked the topic of discussion in the House of Commons that day, and they turned it around so that they were debating abortion all day in the House. So it's a way to distract and a way to deflect away from, people who are en masse going towards conservative policies and politicians because of the economic issues in Canada. And so, it's the typical Liberal playbook to do something like that. So we weren't surprised. I wasn't surprised when I woke up and I got a message saying that there was a gun ban coming that day. And I'm not surprised that they're going to keep doing more, but I do think that it was just political theatrics and just a way to try and appease, because Polly Souvian, the lobby group from the Polly massacre from the 80s, that group is very much turned their back on the Liberals in the last couple of years. They disinvited Justin Trudeau to their remembrance ceremony a number of years ago because they didn't feel that the Liberals were actually doing anything to ban guns that they were asking for. So I really do think that this was a way to try and appease them to get some votes back, and unfortunately it comes at the expense and the safety of firearms owners in Canada, because we all know that these gun bans will have zero impact on the actual crime that's happening in the streets of our cities and such. The law-abiding firearms owners in Canada are the most vetted and the most safe people that you can be around in Canada. I believe it was Gary Mauser sat up in committee one time and showed a picture of a moose and said, "You're more likely to be hurt in Canada by a moose than you are a licensed RCMP vetted firearms owner in Canada." And the stats are there to prove it. Statistics Canada has those stats. So it's something that I think we're used as gun owners, we're used as pawns, and it's got to stop. We got to start paying attention to the science instead.
Yeah. Do you think, something like this last, ban where a couple hundred firearms were on there, do you think that's effective? Do you think it, like, so Polly's obviously a very, a special interest group, and I would imagine pretty small in terms of numbers. Like, there's 2 million gun owners or whatever it is in Canada, like millions of us. And there's probably not a million members that are, or, anti-gun sort of advocates in the country. But do you think that's effective? Do you think it's like, okay, there's like, oh, we affected 5% of the population that think that's a good thing, or they're happy about it? Does that give people the warm and fuzzy?
I think what gives people the warm and fuzzy is the appearance of doing something. But as gun owners, we know that, firearm A and firearm B, their action, their caliber, they're the exact same thing. But firearm A is on the prohibited list because it has a black stock instead of a wood stock. We know that it has no tangible effort. What we need to be focusing on is the revolving door, the bail reform, keeping criminals in jail that are committing the crimes, gang prevention. Let's keep kids from getting involved in gangs. Let's, do some actual tangible efforts, give money and resources to the border, give money and resources to police so that they can combat the crime that's actually happening in the streets rather than, the revolving door that's happening. $700 million is what's being spent on this gun confiscation regime. That money, I can think of so many better efforts that would actually have tangible outcomes than to just take firearms away from the licensed individuals that own them. I was explaining to the American counterparts in SCI the other day about what our licensing regime actually is in Canada and how it works and the process that we have to go through. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. I had a conversation with a Liberal staff member one time, and we were talking. He really wanted to understand what a licensed firearms owner goes through to get their license to be able to own the firearms. And when I explained it to him, he was like, well, why are we banning guns? That doesn't make any sense. And I was like, you work for the Liberals, you tell me. We have all these courses we have to pass with 80%. We have to have continuous eligibility once we get our firearms license. We have lifetime background checks done. We have, the criminal code check done every single day for the continuous eligibility, like I already mentioned. We are the safest population. So why are we wearing the crime that's happening in our streets? Because that's the way the Liberals would have people believe it. But on the other hand, my conversation with that Liberal staffer, he's from Mississauga. His only experience with firearms is seeing a shooting happen at the convenience store down the street. He doesn't realize all of that background check or all of the steps that we go through and the safety, the storage rules, all of that. He doesn't understand it. And so that's something that I think we talk about, but they don't listen to, so they don't understand. And I think that's where some of the divide kind of can come from. But that's also why some of them do feel safer when they hear that, oh, this gun's being banned, so people can't own it. Because they don't understand what it actually takes for us to legally own them. And I've said this before, guns are banned in Canada, ultimately. Every gun is banned in Canada. You need an RCMP license in order to legally purchase them. And so going and further banning them from the people who are RCMP vetted does nothing to curb the crime in the streets.
So help me understand this, and I've thought of this before, but you look at someone like these special interest groups like Polly that we just talked about that is fiercely anti-guns, anti-firearms. They must, like, they're knowledgeable people, right? They're not idiots. They're very calculated in what they're doing, and they have a narrative and that all that. But does the argument not resonate with them? Like, do these things that we say, like, deal with the organized crime, deal with, people that are 3D printing guns, people that are, the border crime, that getting across the border, all that sort of stuff. Do they not subscribe to that? Or is it just like, no, that's our narrative. That's how we fundraise. This is our principle. Because they must agree with that too. They must see through that. Like they know, like, how often does a legal law abiding Canadian citizen go and do a mass shooting in Canada? The numbers are not high. That, like, we know that the statistics prove it. It's organized crime. It's gun, illegal guns, that sort of stuff. So is that like, I feel like it's bigger than just us versus them and like a lack of knowledge. I feel like almost kind of like, conservatives tend to like be more soft on guns and liberals tend to be harder on guns. It's kind of like, no, this is our party principle. This is what we believe as an organization. We're smart enough to know that it's not going to make a difference, but this is what we have to campaign for because this is what we've always said we believe. I don't know. Like,
these organizations such as Poly-Souvian, their end goal is for no civilian ownership of firearms. So it doesn't matter what the stats show. They just don't believe that people should have firearms. And at the end of the day, they sometimes come out and say, well, hunters, like, we're not coming after hunting guns. I think in their mind, they would be happy with us only having bolt action or lever action firearms. I don't like their first target, as you and I both know, full automatic firearms were banned in the 70s. So their target has been semi-automatics since they formed. So they would love to see absolutely zero semi-automatics across Canada. Because to me, I think in their mind, they don't understand that it can't be converted. Like they see it as the next step. The AR-15 looks scary. So, that's why they have this like dubbed term, assault style firearm. They know it's not an assault rifle. They know it's not a military rifle. They just like to parade that around and make it sound scary, even though you and I both know it's just some plastic pieces that have been added to the firearm to make it look kind of cool. And you can really only take them to the range anyway. But they really, I think at the end of the day, just want no civilian ownership. And they parade it around as, to prevent what happened in their school from happening to someone else. But, the shooters in those instances, they have some mental health issues. We have the licensing regime now. We have background checks. If someone red flags or yellow flags, they're going to be investigated. They're going to be looked at. And so we have, as a country, put stuff in place to be able to prevent those types of situations from happening again in the future, or to try to, right? No one's going to be perfect. We're not going to always be able to say that this is never going to happen again, because we can't read the minds of people. But what we can do is to try and make sure that we do the best that we can in, following the rules and the regulations, and having the proper background checks done for anyone who's going to be licensed. And that's why we have that. That's why we have licensing up here, unlike down in the US. So I think that makes a little bit of a difference, but definitely people in urban centers just don't understand that. They don't understand that some of their neighbors likely own firearms, but people are too afraid to talk about it, I think, for fear of backlash, that they just kind of do their own thing and they stick to themselves. And, at the end of the day, we talked earlier about, the hunting community just kind of sitting back and just saying, oh, they're not coming after me. And for so long, we've all done that, where it's like, oh, if they don't look at us, they're not going to come after us. But they are. At the end of the day, they are coming after us. And now it's time for us to stand up and to make it known that we're proud hunters, we're proud firearms owners, and that we're not going down without standing up for our ability to enjoy our heritage activities.
Well, and I think collectively, like, that's where we have to all get on the same page, because it's all kind of at risk. It's maybe it's the low-hanging fruit right now, but eventually it's going to be, if there's one gun left out there, a bolt-action rifle, Paulie wants that shut down. Like, it's going to go away too, right? Like, it's just a matter of time. So thinking that, oh, you're safe or whatever, I don't buy it. I really don't feel like, if there's people that don't like what you're doing, and if you don't start standing up for it and standing up for the other people that have similar activities, and I think, like, anglers are not immune to it either. Like, it's just they're
Look
at
at the lead
too,
bans.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
lead bans. Someone within the Ministry of Environment has long been trying to ban lead from being used in fishing lures and line and all of that stuff, lead jigs and sinkers. So they're not immune to it either. It's death by a thousand cuts. The antis are just trying to get us to not be able to go outside and hunt and fish and sport shoot. They're going to do every little thing that they possibly can. And by targeting all those low hanging fruit, that's what they're trying to do. The federal government a number of years ago tried to increase the migratory bird stamp cost. Hunters are totally okay with an increase to the cost if they have to, but the federal government was channeling more and more of the funds. When we looked at the 5-year proposal, they're channeling more and more of the funds to their own bureaucracy. Well, then that just puts more money into the Ministry of Environment so that they can fight against us. What we want is to see money going into conservation. So this is something that I think we have to stay diligent about and pay attention to on all fronts, in all aspects of the outdoor community. And we all need to be together on it. We all need to stand shoulder to shoulder, whether you're a gun owner or a bow hunter or a fisherman. We're all in the same boat, and we're all being attacked from all sides because they don't like us living off the land. And that's, standing together and having that united front on a national and provincial level is important.
Well, and I think too, we've talked about political parties, we talked about the Liberals, we talked about the cons, and maybe there was a bit of a slant there, but it's kind of, I think the one thing to take away is that we just can't take it for granted that, like, this is not a partisan issue. Like, it's, we need to stand together as a community, no matter what the case may be. Because honestly, like think about it, if the conservatives are in power and maybe they're pro guns and maybe they say they're going to do what they can or whatever, what if there's another mass shooting in Canada? Like, and then like, and if you don't have a lobby that stands up and fights for what we believe in, and then the other side's going to. So it's not like this is a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't. So people might think, oh, the cons are getting in or whatever. The liberals are done. The gun bans are going to go away. I don't kid yourself. It's not. It's they. Even if there's a change in power, it's not going to fix all the problems. They're still going to lobby. The other side's still going to be lobbying. It doesn't matter. So we need to do our part too, in my opinion. So.
Well, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a conservative or not. Other parties have hunters and gun owners. They all have constituents that are hunters and gun owners. And, talking to them across party lines is what's important. Bob Sopak, I did a podcast with Mark Hall recently to talk about the life and legacy of Bob Sopak. And he was a conservative member from Manitoba, and he was amazing at having conversations across the party lines with other MPs that might not see the way he did, but he had respect and they had respect for him and they understood where he was coming from. And I think that's something that's lost in today's world, is having respect for each other's positions. There's a real urban-rural divide right now, and we don't seem to have respect for each other in that sense. And we just, the other side's evil, the other side's bad. How about we try having compassion? We're Canadians after all. Let's have compassion for each other and let's understand where they're coming from. Decisions made by people in the urban centers is what's shutting down the rural ability to manage wildlife populations and such. So instead of fighting against each other, let's try and educate. Let's try and have conversations. Let's understand where each other's coming from, but also stand together and stand up for what's right and what's science-based conservation. But I think that's kind of the direction that we need to bring this country back to. And as an outdoors community and stuff, I believe we're very well poised to try and do that. We just need to stand together.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, there's such, and it's interesting in Canada where I feel like in the U.S. where it's like here and here, like the far right, far left. I heard Ben O'Brien talk about the bell curve about people meeting, and it was like it's a reverse bell curve now. It's just like the far right, the far left, and so few in the middle. Canada, like our swath is way narrower, but it's still pretty. We've never been further apart. And I agree, we need to start hearing each other out and working together. And yeah, the rural urban divide is definitely an issue. There's definitely a disconnect there for some of the things that are important to us, like gun control, certainly wildlife conservation, all these things, because people just are so disconnected with wildlife because you don't see it anymore. You're like stuck in a city, so you just don't see it. But that's a whole new podcast. So
That is.
Quick question for you. I didn't follow it, but LeBlanc went to finance. Who's coming in for public safety?
They haven't announced it yet. So right now he is the Minister of Public Safety as well as the Minister of Finance, and he has a number of other things on his portfolio as well.
Well, finance and public safety, those are pretty easy to manage, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. But they have announced that public safety will be coming off of his plate whenever they get to another cabinet shuffle. But I believe before this happened, they had 9 cabinet vacancies where other cabinet ministers had picked up those portfolios. So I imagine we'll see something come, but they kind of have to put a little bit of distance behind the turmoil and everything that happened on Monday before they can kind of do anything. So I think they're having conversations and trying to figure out who's going to take on all those roles. But yeah, until then, poor Dominic LeBlanc is going to be working from sun up to sundown and then some.
Yeah. Any speculation on who you think might end up in public safety?
Honestly, I don't even know. I'd want to see the list of the 60 MPs that have signed and asked Trudeau to resign, because that'll be a list of who, that's an easy way to knock people off the list and know who's not getting a cabinet portfolio.
Yeah, so. Well said. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, such great wisdom. I always love talking to you. And I whenever we're on the phone and chatting offline, it's always fun to get your perspective, because you've got certainly an understanding in Ottawa well beyond that anything I could ever begin to understand. So appreciate all you do. I guess for anyone that's interested in joining SCI, like I said, I'm a proud life member, great organization. You guys do phenomenal work. if somebody's interested, what's the best thing? Just go to the website, get signed up.
Yeah, go to the website, get signed up. You can reach out to us on Safari Club. So Safari Club at Canada, we actually have an Instagram and a Facebook page. So if you reach out there, you'll reach me directly, and then I can help you through anything. But yeah, safariclub.org is the best way to sign up and get a membership, and then you'll start getting all of our communications, and you can get involved.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everything, Chris. Thanks for all you do. And Jason, if you happen to listen to this again, thanks for being on, and appreciate SCI and everything that you guys stand for.
Thanks for having us on, Kyle.